So I wanted to go over these height gauges. Got a vacuum pump running over here. Got some stuff I'm bagging down. So anyway, these height gauges, I've got 16 of these. And they're made out of 3/4 inch maple right here. I ran a table saw with an 1/8 inch curve right down the center of this 1/8 inch or 3/4 inch maple. And just make it about 1/4 inch deep. And what you want is, once you run the table saw through the top of this maple 1/4 inch deep, 1/8 inch ply will fit snugly in that notch. Now, depending on the saw kerf, I mean, you might have to experiment. The variables are the saw kerf, and the other variables how thick the plywood is. What you want, and you want it, if anything, a little bit too small, the notch. And you might have to sand it out, but you want a snug fit. And the reason why you want a snug fit, when you set this thing up, what you'll do is you'll take a proven, accurate square, and you'll rock this plywood upright back and forth until you have a perfect 90-degree. And then once you get this thing set in that notch, then you wick thin CA down that seam and it locks it in place. Now, it really doesn't matter the size. I mean, it's all adjustable. What has to happen is the block has to lay flat without rocking. Now this one has got a rock. And what I'll do before I use it, I'll make sure I run it over sandpaper. And then I'll double check to make sure it's still 90 degrees. I'll lap this in a little bit. But you don't want any rock. And when it sits flat, you want this to be exactly 90 degrees. And before you actually glue this upright into this maple block or whatever you use, maple I like, cut this notch on a router. And this is like the old adjustable lead-out guides. It's a block. And this block is also out of maple, motor mount stock, I believe. So it's just it's a T-block. I ran these things across the router. And then I drilled it for just a straight pin. So once you get the blocks made, make sure they slide in the notch without too much resistance. That's a blind nut. That thing should be glued in there. Shouldn't have fallen out like that, but it's okay. So you want it to slide without really any slop. You know, you got to have it free enough to go up and down the notch, but you don't want it rocking. Once you lock this down, you want to be able to actually make sure that the block doesn't rock. You want to make sure that block doesn't rock in there. Okay. So now that you've got these constructed, 16 of them. Now, obviously, you got to batch cut them. I mean, you set up a chop saw, you knock out 15 blocks, you slice up these grooves, you mass produce these plates. And it doesn't take long if you have the right equipment. And you can double check, you can slide these together to make sure, you know, you're getting your 90 degree, you know. Okay, so when you have 16 of these, you have 4 on the outboard panel, 4 on the inboard panel. Horizontal stab, you've got 4 of these jigs here and 4 out here. So what I do is, let's just pretend this is a fuselage. The first thing I do is I set this fuse on a crutch on this glass, and you'll see this crosshair right here. So just pretend this area right here is a full sheet of glass to hold the full airplane. And you've got to lay these things out perfect. You use masking tape on the glass and a razor blade to cut the masking tape. And what you want these crosshairs to represent, right down the middle is your fuselage. This is the trailing edge of your wing, and this is the trailing edge of your stab. So you're setting your incidence right here between your wing and the stab. And everything's got to be 90 degrees. And of course, if everything's 90 off of the center line of the fuse, then this line will be parallel to that. So spend your time and make sure it's perfect. So you'll take the fuse and you'll set it on a crutch. You're going to have to jig it up somewhere, and you're going to establish the thrust line. You got the thrust line and then a datum line or a center line down the fuse. I can't say center because I can't really say center because there's nothing in the fuse that's centered. It's just a datum line on your top block, let's say. So you make sure that that fuse is exactly where you want it with one of these gauges. And then you set another block, it's adjustable back here to prop the tail up. So you get the fuse set exactly on this line, and then you get it the right height, okay? So then you take 4 of these per each panel. And what you'll do, once you establish from the fuse, you'll see, you should have on the fuse marked where the center line of the wing goes. So you'll take one of these jigs, and you'll go off of that fuse center line where the wing is going to go, and you set this pin exactly where that center line of the wing is on the fuse. And then the other 7 jigs, once you set this, you can set the other 7 off of this one, and you can take this thing and you can put those pins exactly on top of each other. And what you want to do, and when you sight it in and adjust all the height gauges, you make those pins off of this one the exact same. So what you'll do with this wing, when you slide these up to this line you've established, and the trailing edge is up against the plywood upright, and same over here, plywood, the trailing edge is against the upright, you're actually driving these pins into the wing. And you do 2 at the root, 2 out here at the trailing edge tip, and then you'll come around to the leading edge. You'll do 2 at the tip and 2 at the root. So what you've established is that wing is perfectly flat to this perfect flat glass. You'll come back here to the stab and you'll do the same thing. You'll establish where you want the stab. You'll adjust one of these blocks, adjust the other 7 off of that one, and then you'll start plugging these things into your stab, and you'll go around, you'll put 2 at the root, 2 at the tip. You'll come around this way on the leading edge of your stab. You'll plug 2 in at the tip and 2 in at the root. So you've established, as long as the glass is shimmed perfectly flat within a few thousandths, and these are all set correctly, and you have these lines laid out in a grid, you're going to have a perfect airplane. But you'll be surprised. I mean, if you have a surface you've built that it's a warp wing or warp tail or something, and you start to assemble these components, it's going to show up and it's going to hit you right in the face. So I can't stress enough, as you're building the plane and all the components, the stab, the wing, you've got to make sure they're dead on, because if you start assembling crooked parts with this system, you know, it's you're in trouble. So it's like a finish. It starts at the first piece of wood you cut. Alignment starts at the first piece you cut also. And the other thing you can do, if you're joining your stab halves and you have no way of making sure, you know, everything's messy and you got to make sure that center line is followed and you're going to adjust the incidence between each stab half, you can plug these things in here and go around the perimeter, and it'll allow you to glue it together correctly. So I think that's a quick overview. Eventually, when I get to the point where my airplane is ready to be jigged up and set up, then I'll go ahead and cover this in super detail. But right now, this is just a quick overview. I just wanted to show a few people, you know, how these things are constructed. And the neat thing about this system is it's all reusable. You can use this for components, you can use this for all different types of airplanes because they're adjustable. And the neat thing is, once you get these things adjusted and locked down, these pins actually insert into your wing and stab, and it holds the whole airplane exactly where it needs to be. And then you'll go through there at the root of the stab and the wing, and you'll put fiberglass in there, or you'll actually glue everything together when it's in this state. And the other thing that's nice about this is when you have a fuse crutch and you're going to add a top block later, when this thing is all jigged up and you put that top block on there, and you're going to tell if anything's starting to get funny, because you can actually fit that top block while it's on this jig. And the other thing I like to do, if you're using a molded top block or shell, I always like to put a little cross bracing down the fuse crutch, top and bottom, which gives you a lot of torsional rigidity. And then of course you put the block on. But this will let you know after the fact, you know, that once everything comes together, that it's still in alignment. So just a quick overview, quick look at these jigs. Like I said, there's 4 on this panel, 4 on this panel, 4 and 4, 16 pieces. And then you have another one. You have to sort of custom make the one that holds the lead, or the nose at the right height off the glass. And then the one back here at the tail, all it is a sliding jig that goes up and down with slots, and that just raises and lowers the tail off the glass. And it's just a little table or a little jig that can be adjusted up and down that the tail will actually sit on. So there you go. Hope that helps, and I'll cover the rest in detail when I actually put that plane together.